Ilan Pappé est historien. Depuis plus de 40 ans, il travaille sur les conditions de formation de l'État qu'il a vu naître, Israël. Fils de juifs allemands ayant fui les nazis, il est né en 1954 à Haïfa, ville portuaire au nord du territoire israélien, à 50 km de la frontière avec le Liban.
So I grew up in Haifa, but I was not aware of what happened in 1948. I didn't know anything about the expulsion, the destruction of the Palestinian side of the city. And it's only probably when I was in my late 20s that I understood that in my own hometown, the ethnic cleansing was very dramatic, because out of the 75,000 Palestinians who lived in Haifa, only 3,000 were allowed to stay. And of course, I now look very differently on the place I was born and lived. My university expelled me, and no other university was willing to employ me. So the message was clear, right? What I mean. The Ministry of Education has a more official regulation trying to stop me from entering schools. The universities say that if I come to talk in a campus, it will create insecurity. So they try to stop this.
Je suis un historien qui a toujours fait son travail avec une extrême rigueur. Mes étudiants m'estiment, et pourtant je suis attaqué continuellement, parce que les conclusions de mes recherches ne sont pas cohérentes avec la version officielle sur le contexte qui a amené la naissance d'Israël et posent des questions sur les politiques à l'égard des Palestiniens et des Arabes.
Ilan Pappé, professeur de sciences politiques à l'université de Haïfa, l'un de ces jeunes chercheurs israéliens que l'on appelle ici les nouveaux historiens. Des hommes qui remettent en cause certains des mythes fondateurs de l'histoire officielle d'Israël.
Au début des années 2000, Ilan Pappé enseigne donc à l'université de Haïfa. Théodore Katz, un étudiant, y soutient un mémoire sur le massacre commis le 23 mai 1948 à Tantoura, un village de pêcheurs palestiniens. Malgré sa solidité, l'étude fait un tollé. Katz est lâché par l'université, traîné en justice pour diffamation et contraint à rédiger une lettre d'excuse. Ilan Pappé sera le seul à le soutenir publiquement, s'attirant les foudres de sa direction. De plus en plus critiqué, Pappé finira par s'exiler en Grande-Bretagne. Ce n'est qu'en 2022, plus de 20 ans après la première publication, qu'un film documentaire basé sur les témoignages de vétérans israéliens confirme la thèse de Katz. Le massacre de Tantoura a bien eu lieu.
The new historians was a term that really related to a very small number of Israeli historians who happened to work at the same time in the archives when the documents about 1948 were declassified, were open to the public. And we were different from the other historians who looked at it that by realizing that actually it tells a story that Israel denied for many years. So they gave us the term new historian in the sense that we are, unlike the old historians, we are accepting some of the main claims that Palestinians were making, and we say that they are true on the basis of the evidence we found in the archives. And that became kind of a collective name for later on for any Israeli academic that challenges the hegemonic narrative of Israel, not only about 1948, about other chapters in the history of the Zionist movement or the history of the State of Israel. The publication of these works created a lot of anger. And some people say, you know, you are lying, it's not true. Other people would say, why are you saying it, even if it's true?
I think that a student that wrote such a lousy, sloppy work should be thrown out of the university.
So yes, it's a topic that you have to be ready that it would make many people around you angry, whether it's your family, your society, or university, your politicians. So it was always, until today, regarded as unacceptable for most Israelis. But of course, the reaction outside Israel was much better. And that gives me a lot of strength, because I knew that outside of Israel, people realize that this is something that they should know and is important. And I wrote the ethnic cleansing, the book, I wrote it in English on purpose, because I didn't want to educate the Israelis, I wanted to educate the world about it. It is a work that challenges myth. The first myth that I think we kind of challenged was that the war of 1948 was a war between a very small Israel, or David in biblical terms, and an Arab Goliath. It was a war between a very small group of people against a lot of armies and countries, and it was almost a miracle that this little army succeeded in front of all the Arab world. We examined the evidence, and the evidence was that until the end of the mandate, which is the 15th of May 1948, the Arab world was not involved at all in the war in Palestine. And it was only between the Jewish/Zionist forces and some military groups that the Palestinians had. And in that stage of the war, there were many more soldiers on the Zionist side, on the Jewish side. And they were better equipped, more experienced, and the balance was definitely in favor of the Zionist forces.
Le 15 mai 1948 marque la fin du mandat britannique sur la Palestine. La veille, David Ben-Gourion a déclaré unilatéralement la naissance d'Israël.
Nous appelons tous les Juifs de la diaspora à se joindre à nous et à nous prêter main forte pour faire que la rédemption d'Israël soit assumée jusqu'à la fin des siècles.
After the 15th of May, when the Arab countries sent some troops into Palestine from Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, even then it was more or less an equal number of soldiers on both sides, and therefore we said it was not a miracle, it was a natural outcome of the balance of power. The second myth, which I think is the most important one, is that according to the Israeli narrative, the Palestinians were told by the Arab leaders and by their own leaders to leave Palestine. And that's why they became refugees. And we showed that this was not true, that there was no such call. No Arab leader, no Palestinian leader called on any Palestinian to leave. On the contrary, the Palestinians became refugees because they were expelled, not because they, as the Israelis like to say, voluntarily left Palestine. And I think this was very important because Israel always said it has no responsibility for the Palestinian refugee problem because Israel did not create it, did not make it, but we showed it did. And I particularly worked on this and showed that this was not a coincidence, or it happened because there was a systematic plan to what I called ethnically cleanse the Palestinians.
ברוב הקרבות בכיבוש של הכפרים הערביים, תמיד הייתה הוראה, והייתה הוראה של בן-גוריון, לגרש את האנשים משם.
And I don't think that this was the result of the war. I think Israel used the war in order to expel the Palestinians. The third myth is Israel always claimed that even after the war it was willing to make peace with the Palestinians, with the Arab world. We showed actually that there was a willingness on the Palestinian side and the Arab countries to enter peace negotiations after the war, but it was Israel that refused to discuss peace because they were very successful in taking over 80% of Palestine, nearly 80%, and expelling so many Palestinians, half of Palestine's population. So they were in no mood to negotiate after 48. Yeah, so these are the three main issues.
En 2006, Ilan Pappé publie Le nettoyage ethnique de la Palestine. Dans cet ouvrage, il revient minutieusement sur l'établissement de l'État d'Israël, son cortège de massacres et de destructions.
I think it's very important, the historical context. First of all, in the book, The Ethnic Cleansing, you can see how the Gaza Strip became the Gaza Strip. Many people don't know that. There was no Gaza Strip before 1948. Israel created the Gaza Strip because it needed a place to which it wanted to push the Palestinians that it had expelled from the center and south of Palestine. The Palestinians that Israel expelled in the north and the center of Palestine, Israel was able to push to Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, what became later the West Bank. But the Egyptians, like today, refused to accept Palestinian refugees. So in order to deal with the hundreds of thousands of people expelled, Israel pushed them into this area that they agreed with the Egyptians to call it the Strip, the Gaza Strip, which is less than 2% of Palestine, and created there the biggest refugee camp. So one generation of people in Gaza are the generation of the 48 refugees, and some of them were the last people to be pushed, as I show in the book, to be pushed into the Gaza Strip. And they actually come from the areas and villages that were destroyed on the last phases of the ethnic cleansing, and on their ruins, Israel built some of the settlements that the Hamas attacked on the 7th of October. So that's one important context. The second context is what happened after 48, especially after 1967, after the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Both areas became under military rule, a very harsh military rule, both in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and that's another context that explains to you what a middle generation of Gaza has experienced, more than 56 years of their life under military occupation. Then you have, of course, something I don't write in the book because it became later, but of course the events of the last, I should say, 17 years since the election of the Hamas in Gaza, the eviction of the Israeli settlers, and the imposition of the siege on Gaza.
Nous allons mourir de faim. La situation à Gaza était déjà mauvaise et nous n'avons même plus une seule tomate à manger. Ni moi, ni les autres.
You can see a whole generation of young Palestinians who know only one reality, which is being exposed to 4 Israeli attacks from the air, the land, and the sea, really heavy bombardments. Then they do something else after occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They use the system of enclosing people, like in mega prisons, and not allowing them to move, don't give them any civil rights, and also violate most of their human rights. But I think what is important is something that comes out from the book, that Zionism is a settler colonial project. And like many settler colonial projects, which are projects built earlier on in history by Europeans who had to leave Europe because they were persecuted, because they had trouble, and they come to countries where already someone lives. And then they have this impulse, this motive to get the country without the people as much as they can. Of course, it depends which historical period we are talking. So in 1948, the main method the Zionist movement used as a settler colonial movement that takes over someone else's homeland was to expel people massively. Nowadays, we have 700,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank. And I think that if you look at the book, you understand that the idea of the ethnic cleansing was always part of the Zionist project from the very beginning. It just took different ways of implementing it according to the change of circumstances. So the same ideology that is behind the ethnic cleansing of 1948 is behind what we are seeing today, which is a genocide in Gaza.
Le 7 octobre 2023, le Hamas coordonne l'attaque Opération Déluge d'Al-Aqsa, qui fait 1140 morts, dont plus de 690 civils. Très vite en France, l'État se positionne et sanctionne les points de vue dissidents, pendant que dans les médias français, les tentatives de contextualisation politique et historique sont pointées du doigt.
Je pense que la différence entre nous, c'est que moi, je me situe au niveau vraiment de l'analyse, de qu'est-ce que c'est ce groupe, et là, je ne suis pas dans le jugement moral.
I think what is really important to say here that this whole idea that you're not allowed to say the context, which began when the General Secretary of the United Nations immediate reaction to the 7th of October was that we should remember it was not done in a the Hamas attack was not done in a vacuum, but was done in a historical context. And immediately Israel demanded his dismissal. Is part of this attempt by Israel to control the narrative.
Je veux redire ici qu'Israël est un pays ami, à qui je veux réaffirmer, au nom de la représentation nationale, notre totale solidarité et notre soutien inconditionnel.
We know that the political elites here in France, like in so many other countries in Europe, and we can include the United States in this, are very careful not to deviate from the Israeli narrative. They never did deviate, they always accepted the Israeli narrative. This is the work of a lobby, which is very strong in France, as it is in other countries. And therefore it's not surprising that Israel dictates to France what it would like to be allowed and not allowed when talking about, and this has been going on for many years.
Notre message est clair, le président de la République l'a rappelé ce matin. D'abord, un soutien total à Israël et à sa population.
When this unconditional support was expressed, the Israeli government and the political elite understood it as a carte blanche to do whatever they want in Gaza. This gave legitimacy to the Israelis to do what they started doing a few days after the 7th of October and are still doing today, which is a genocide operation.
שמעת ביבי? כובשים ומגרשים ומתיישבים. יושב ראש הקהילה. סוג של מסגד, שלא יהיו בתפילות יום שישי יותר! היידה! עם ישראל חי! יש לי מסר לכל החולדות שבעזה, לבנון, איראן. אל תתעסקו עם צה"ל. אתם תצאו מרוסקים.
I think Israelis were surprised later on that some people, including President Macron himself, became a bit more reserved in this unconditional support, calling for a ceasefire, asking Israel to respect international law. Very late. They came up with this when it was actually too late. And anyway, like always when it comes to the West and Israel, they don't translate the words into actions. I mean, even if it's symbolic and cynical sometimes, the decision not to invite Israel to the arms exhibition in France, some other actions in Belgium. Belgium took some action. I think even the recognition of Palestine by Norway, Belgium, and Spain are part of the political elite's understanding that they misunderstood what their unconditional support would do. It's a bit too late to too many people in Gaza, and it's still not enough, of course. It doesn't stop the Israelis. I think Israel is becoming more and more right-wing, and because of that, the international criticism grows. What causes the Israeli young people to be right-wing is, first of all, the educational system in Israel that produces them. And secondly, this is, for me, the logical outcome, unfortunately, of Zionism. The whole idea is, if you impose yourself by force on millions of people who don't want to be ruled by you, you can play with democracy for a while, but you cannot be both democratic and oppressive. You cannot be both liberal and colonizer. It doesn't work together. There is a new kind of Israeli society that grew up in the Jewish settlements around religious Zionist ideology, and it's very popular with the young people. It's very messianic.
Je suis l'héritier unique d'Abraham. Unique d'Abraham.
It's very racist.
J'ai aucun problème à parler de ce qu'on appelle ici péjorativement de kibouch. Kibouch veut dire occupation.
He doesn't care about international law.
Oui, effectivement, on a reconquis cette terre. Et donc elle est occupée, mais elle est occupée par ses habitants.
He doesn't care about international opinion, actually.
Les Palestiniens, c'est nous.
They believe that God is with them. And this is now the face of young Israel. I think that, especially after the 7th of October, the hatred, the demonization of the Palestinians has reached new levels, but it was there before. I mean, racism is a very important part of the Israeli educational system. The Israeli discourse, both the public, the popular one, is very racist towards Arabs in general and Palestinians in particular.
אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
We talked about ethnic cleansing. Sometimes ethnic cleansing is a huge military operation by an army, but sometimes it's an atmosphere where you create fear, intimidation, a sense of insecurity, and you allow these vigilantes, these thugs, to do these things, and they are encouraged by their rabbis, by their teachers to do this. It really reminds us of a very dark period in the history of Europe where young people were easily convinced or persuaded or indoctrinated to do terrible things to other people, not thinking very much, but just obeying their gurus or ideological leaders. Well, the left in Israel has to be redefined, first of all. We used to think that the Zionist left is left, but it's not left. So we are left with the anti-Zionists. And they are very small in numbers, of course. But it's important that they are there because it gives a chance maybe in the future to increase that kind of conscientious moral position of Jews who are Israeli citizens. So even if they are in small numbers, it's very important to have them and hope that they will survive under very difficult conditions. I think it's also very important for the world to know that there are this kind of views. Although I think it's good enough that so many young Jews around the world are now becoming pro-Palestinian. But even for the future, for reconciliation in the future, it would be good for young Palestinians to know that there were also Israeli Jews who were supportive. And that may help for a less violent decolonization in the future. It means that we unfortunately cannot hope for change from within the Israeli society in the near future. And that's a pity, but we have to accept the reality. I think that even the one group of Palestinians that knew the Israelis not only as settlers and soldiers, which is the Palestinian citizens of Israel, almost 2 million people, are now also targeted with the same racism as the Palestinians elsewhere and the Israelis are even closing themselves more than before against any possibility of building something together in the future. Israel is a state of denial. In English, sometimes we call it denialism. Most Israeli Jews of my generation, the generations of my children, the grandchildren, are still very ignorant about what happened in 1948. Educational system does not teach about it. The media doesn't talk about it. The politicians definitely do not talk about it. So they have very little sources from which to learn about it. It's a moral issue. I do believe the historians have a moral duty as well as a duty to tell the truth about what happened. And I don't separate the two. So I'm writing both because I found the evidence that I'm interested in, but also because I believe that this is an important story to tell, and I'm willing to challenge those who are denying the story or trying to cover it up.